Welcome. Thank you so much for listening today. I really appreciate it. Today's topic is going to be maintaining your paver sidewalk, driveway ribbons, and patio. Before we get started, just a quick introduction. My name is Kathleen Carr. I own a company called The Growing Scene. We are a garden center and landscape company. So to kind of jump right into today's discussion, the whole point of the class is to give you some very practical tips that will help you to enjoy spending time on your patio, as well as enhancing the look, maintaining the structural integrity, and then also lower the amount of yearly maintenance on your brick sidewalk or patio. So the first thing that I would encourage you to do is really take a look at your paved surface and evaluate it. And you may actually just kind of want to get out a notebook and pen and take some notes as you're asking yourself these questions. So the first one to ask is simply, are the pavers level? As you walk on the surface and as you look at the surface, do they all seem to be at the same height? Number two, generally a paved surface will have a plastic edging on the outside of it. Can you see that edging, or is the edging abutted as closely to the sides of the pavers as possible? So when the paving surface was initially installed, that plastic edging should have been abutted right up to the pavers. Also, the top of the edging should be either just even or really just below the top of the pavers. Oftentimes, over time, though, the paver has separated both away, kind of wider than the pavers, and it's separated so that it's higher than the pavers. Number three, are there any weeds growing in between your pavers? Again, you're just kind of noticing what's going on. We're not yet talking about the solutions, but really just observation and looking at the surface. Number four, can you see the space or the joints in between the bricks? Again, when the pavers were installed, generally there should be only kind of a pretty narrow, maybe even like 1/8 of an inch gap in between the pavers. Unfortunately, though, over time, that space or the joints can tend to widen. There are some examples of possible problems with pavers. In the upper left corner of your screen, you will see that there's been some sinking or some shifting to the pavers. You can also see that that's that plastic edging that I was talking about. So in this case, you can see that the pavers are very uneven. This set of pavers right here is called a soldier course, and then this is the field. So with the soldier course, it looks like the field is relatively even, although there certainly is some wide joints here. But then it's that soldier course that initially was installed by these retaining wall blocks. The soldier course is continuing to, kind of the base is eroding, and the soldier course of pavers is becoming more and more uneven. And then at this point, where there was not any retaining wall blocks, they use that plastic, it's called snap edge edging, to kind of keep the pavers in check. Unfortunately, though, whatever was on top of the edging is kind of eroded away or worn away, and the edging has dropped, and therefore the pavers are starting to drop. You're also seeing a weed grow. So this surface has a couple of different things going on. This is an example of pavers, again, that have shifted. I don't know why, but it's more like the pavers in the field or the center have shifted. Over here, this is an example of actually the pavers themselves have cracked. You can see that there's some cracks here and here, as well as over there and over there. If you do have any cracking, I would encourage you to try to do some research, find out who the manufacturer of the pavers was or is, and then contact that manufacturer to see if there's any sort of warranty on the materials. On the bottom left, this is actually a problem with the sand. You can see there's, this is called the chamfer, or the area in between the pavers. There is a lot of sand right there in the chamfer, and there's even some sand on top of the pavers themselves. Typically, the sand is only in the joints, not on top of the paver. So to get to evaluating the problem a little bit more and trying to figure out why it occurred and then how to what the solution is, how to solve the problem. So structural shifting does occur with paved surfaces. There are some pretty common reasons for it to occur, and we're just going to kind of take a look and discuss some of the common reasons. So number one, the wrong jointing sand was used. So our company's been in business now for 25 years. Back when we initially started installing paved surfaces, play sand was kind of like the industry standard. It was just regular coarse sand was swept onto the top of a paved surface after it was constructed. Unfortunately, though, that's play sand really tended to erode pretty quickly. A kind of the next generation of sand, or a new sand, is being used currently. It's called a polymeric sand. It has a little bit of an adhesive quality, so the grains of sand tend to stick to each other. It's certainly not a mortar compound, but it is an improved version. So sometimes structural shifting can occur because the wrong sand or the wrong jointing sand was used. Number two, in a previous slide, we had seen that black edging. Unfortunately, that edging can shift. If that is occurring in your situation, I would encourage you to have that edging reset sooner rather than later, because once the edging starts to shift, then the pavers themselves can start to shift. It's kind of the domino effect. Another reason for structural shifting is if kind of a really strong ice melt product is used in the winter, that can cause some problems with the pavers. I think of all the contributing factors we're talking about on this particular slide, the last two that are listed, so numbers 4 and 5, are the more common ones. Unfortunately, I do see some structural shifting occurring due to erosion. Water, as much as we all need water in our diet and our lives, water is also a pretty erosive element. If you have a paved surface, I would not only evaluate the surface, but I would also evaluate the sources of water that are near that surface. A couple pretty common sources of water. One, obviously your downspout, and the gutters. I would take a look at where the water from the downspout goes, and encourage you, if it goes anywhere near a paved surface, to either have that downspout buried or certainly extended to get it away from the paved surface. Another source of water might be like an irrigation system. If the next time, if your irrigation system is turned on for the season, the next time it goes off, I would take a look at your, if you have paved surfaces, I would take a look at those surfaces and see if there's any signs of water, meaning that the water from the irrigation system might have been going onto your patio or to your sidewalk, and consider adjusting those heads, because you really want to be watering the plants, not the paved surface. The last one listed is, unfortunately, pavers can shift if the base was not constructed correctly. Everything kind of in the process of, say, just establishing a beautiful paver patio. Really, the key element is to make sure that base was excavated deep enough, and then the base material was compacted well enough. So if you've evaluated your paved surface, you've realized that unfortunately you do have some leveling issues, you've tried to figure out why those leveling issues occurred, then the next step would be to correct the leveling issues. So the first step would be, if you were to take on this project yourself, the first step would be, I would encourage you to just, take a few pictures, so you have some documentation as to, once you take the pavers out, perhaps how they need to go back. You may also just want to take a pencil and, kind of lightly write on the sides or the bottom of the paver, number them, so that you have a better idea of how to relay them. So if you had an area in your patio, say, that was not level, and it was say an 18-inch by 18-inch area, what I would encourage you to do is really not just take those pavers that are unlevel, so that, those pavers in that 18-inch by 18-inch area. I would actually go wider than that. I'd probably go even out to a 3-foot by 3-foot area, remove all those pavers, set them aside, then take a look at the area underneath those pavers and level that base. Generally, we would construct the base of a paver surface using grade 8 gravel and or some limestone screenings. You're going to want to make sure that that new base material is really compacted. One particular tool that would help you do that is by getting a hand tamp and really tamping on that. If you have to add, like several inches of material, then you may want to compact it. Put down an inch of the grade 8 gravel, compact that, put down another inch, compact that. So compact it in sections. Then you'd want to relay the pavers. And then you may also want to compact the entire paver surface using a gas-powered compactor. And those can be rented. I would just make sure to talk to whoever you're renting them from to make sure it's appropriate to use it over a paved surface. So if you've corrected the leveling issues, the next thing would be to take a look at that edging. Generally, if the edging is starting to pop up, either coming up or coming out away from the pavers, generally that edging would need to be removed and then replaced with new edging. Rarely can you reuse the same edging. Now, sometimes if it's just starting to pop up a little bit, you may just be able to kind of, slightly, especially in the springtime, just kind of slightly walk on it a little bit and reset it. You may be able to use kind of a rubber mallet and kind of, just pound it in a little bit. If it hasn't, gotten kind of too far out of sync. If it's anything more than that, then unfortunately you probably need to remove it and then reuse it. Replace it. When you replace it, I would encourage you, especially if you're the first, set of edging, came apart or, kind of pushed up pretty easily. I would encourage you to really set the nails in or the anchors pretty closely. So in this particular edging, these kind of shiny dots or spots are the anchors or the nails. You can see here on the side, there's a nail there and a nail there, but they have not put a nail here in the middle. I would encourage you, if you're reinstalling new edging, to use about 8-inch long nails and then set them pretty closely so that you don't have the same problem with the edging popping up that you did the first time. I would also be prepared that you probably want to backfill that edging with a little bit of topsoil and some grass seed. In this particular picture, there's a bunch of gravel that's not typical. Typically, you would have either mulch or sod abutting the side of this paver patio. And then when you're all done, really just kind of a little thin piece of plastic should be visible on the edge of your patio. Everything else should be covered up either with topsoil, seed, sod, or mulch. We've talked a little bit about weeds, and unfortunately weeds do tend to pop up sometimes in a paved surface. There's a couple different things you can do with them. They could either be removed mechanically or chemically. Mechanically, it's really just kind of getting down on your hands and knees and pulling them out. We often use just kind of a straight edge, or even sometimes just like a screwdriver to just kind of get in those grooves and pull those weeds out with as many of the roots still attached as possible. If you're open to using chemicals, you can either use a chemical herbicide or an organic herbicide. One particular option for an organic herbicide is something called Burnout 2. It is an organic herbicide. It does have the potential to kill anything that it's sprayed on. So just be careful, especially if you have good plants or lawn adjacent to your patio. Apply it only according to the directions. on the label. Make sure to watch the weather forecast, and you may also want to do just kind of a little test spray of whatever you're spraying on your paved surface, kind of off in the corner in a little bit of a nondescript area. As far as filling in the spaces between the pavers, of everything that we've talked about, this is by far and away the most difficult. Yes, weeding can be a little bit labor intensive, and certainly removing a section of pavers can get pretty in depth, and removing the edging and reinstalling the edging can be tough. However, the reason that I say that applying the sand is the most difficult is there's just no forgiveness. If something goes wrong when you're applying the sand, it's a really, really hard fix. So in general, sand should be swept into the pavers about every other year or so. It's really whenever those joints open up and you can kind of see in between those pavers. And then, as we had mentioned, polymeric sand is kind of like the gold standard for the industry. Sand does provide a couple of different benefits. It inhibits weed growth, and it also cuts down on insects. It will also help with the erosion as well. Here's some information about one particular type of sand. It's manufactured by a company called Technoseal. This is RG+, a specific type of polymeric sand that is for paved surfaces. And there's a lot of information here. It does prevent, or I would say it inhibits weed growth. You can still get, especially if you're, say your sidewalk or your patio is kind of on the north side of your home, if it's real shady, you can still get some moss or algae growing on top of the paver, but generally they don't, it doesn't grow kind of from underneath the paved surface. It would just be on top. If you're going to apply sand, the first step would be to power wash the area and then only sweep the sand in, but according to the directions on the packaging. And then here is some, other information about sand. What you would do is, as I had mentioned, power wash the area thoroughly, completely, kind of really take your time and get out as much of the old sand as you can. So once that is removed, then you would sweep the sand into the top. And here's, some examples of kind of what we're all hoping to achieve, a beautiful patio or sidewalk. The other thing that I would say about sweeping the sand in is no matter which, and there's several manufacturers that make polymeric sand, no matter which manufacturer you go with, I would do your research ahead of time. I would go to their website. I would watch any videos. I would, this is, one example that I would read every bit of direction that you possibly can prior to sweeping in that sand, and make sure that you're ready for it. Make sure if you need to tape off any, siding on the home or tape off anything, make sure you've kind of protected those surfaces before you start this project. Now to get into sealing a little bit, the question is always, should I seal my pavers? Should I not seal my pavers? You can see in the upper right corner, there's, definitely a difference between an unsealed paver surface and a sealed paver surface. Sealing absolutely has a couple of great benefits. One, it really kind of protects the surface from stains. It helps to prevent the discoloration of the pavers, makes them a little bit easier to clean, also reduces the moss growth, just to name a few of the benefits. Here's a little bit more information about the benefits of sealing, just, kind of highlighting a few other things. As we talked about, it really protects it. A patio, for instance, from barbecue grease or, other leaves that are kind of disintegrating on the patio. A little bit more information about it. I guess I would just emphasize the last bullet point here. If you do choose to seal, it's, kind of like sanding. You probably have to do it, I would say, every 2 to 4 years. Sealing I think does make a substantial difference in the look of your pavers when it's first put down, but then by, whether it's year 2, 3, or 4, when it starts flaking off, it's, in my estimation, it looks pretty bad. It's something that you really need to keep up on. So know that once you start sealing that surface, you have to do it. So you're adding just another level of maintenance to your paved surface should you decide to seal it. This is a little bit more information about snow and ice removal and things that you can use on pavers. I would just really be careful about snow plows and snow blowers and make sure that they have plastic blades. I would also try to use something called Safe Melt. It's something that is actually sold at pet supply stores. So, what's good for kind of our dog's paws also is safe for pavers. But again, there's some more information listed there. So I just added a little bit towards the end of this presentation about maintenance to retaining wall structures. Retaining wall structures are much, much different. Maintaining those is much different than maintaining a paved surface, primarily because with retaining wall structures, a glue is used between the different courses or layers of the retaining wall block. So as we talked about, if the example was your patio is shifting in an 18-inch by 18-inch area, well, you just lift the pavers off, set them aside, redo the base, reinstall the pavers. If you have a seat wall that starts to shift, you can't simply just lift that capstone off and lift the retaining wall blocks off. Because it's all glued together, you're going to have to start using a mallet and start kind of separating those particular retaining wall blocks, chiseling off the glue, and then starting from scratch, building everything and gluing it all back together. So it's kind of a whole nother ballgame and a much more difficult to handle the structural issues on the retaining wall. Here is just to add a little bit of levity, something a little bit different to the presentation. Just to add one little plant at the end. So the perennial plant of the year for 2020 is something called Ariella Sun King. It's also called Golden Japanese Spikenard. This is a great plant. It can get pretty tall, I would say about 3 foot by 3 foot, but it's a great plant that adds a little bit of color to a shady spot. I apologize that I cannot take questions in this format, but my contact information was at the beginning of this presentation. If you have any questions, I know some of the presentation got a little technical, but if you have any questions, feel free to send me pictures, email me. I will definitely follow up with you. So thank you again for watching this. I really appreciate your time. Here's a little bit of a preview of some other videos that I will be recording to give you a little bit more information about gardening. So thank you again and have a wonderful rest of your day.